I'm going to show you my sketchbook in this video. In fact, I'm going to show you how unimportant they are to me now, so much so that I often end up sketching anywhere but in the pages of my sketchbook most of the time. I want to show you two sets of sketchbook. One that I made when I sort of cared about what the drawings in my sketchbook looked like back when I was studying, and the one that I use today, which is frankly boring and unimpressive. There are two schools of thought about sketchbooks, two ways to see their function. One is to see them as a part of your art, and the second one is to see them as part of your process, as a mere instrument to create the art, but not as the art in itself. First, let me address the amazing artists who create sketchbook masterpieces, like Cesar Santos, for example. He has several sketchbook tour videos, and I really encourage you to watch them because he's amazing. You look at these sketchbooks and think, oh my god, what am I even doing with my life? If this is a sketch, then why am I even making art? And props to Cesar and everyone taking beauty seriously, man. They don't fool around. If they pick up a pencil or a brush, whatever it is destined to be in the end, they want to make it look perfect. And I respect that big time. Another super inspiring artist, if you like this type of sketchbook art, is Gurney, a breathtaking artist, a great guy and a huge inspiration. And I find it fascinating to look at these types of sketchbooks, but for me, in my own creative process, this would be a gigantic waste of time because I don't plan on keeping them for prosperity. Here's a sketchbook that I did back in the days before I actually came up with my own painting process, my personal way of making my paintings, before I actually found my style. Paradoxically, the less sure I was about my art and my style, and the more I tried to refine my sketchbook. Basically, when I had no idea what kind of painting I want to make, and when I had no idea what my art was supposed to be about, I wasted a lot of time trying to polish things up in my sketchbook. Even worse, sometimes I was trying to fake the sketchbook look, which is a real sin. By that, I mean make it look like it was quickly scribbled, but with this very, this very desirable aesthetic of a beautifully done sketchbook. I used to try to make it look unfinished but pretty, It was awful. What a waste of time. I literally spent hours trying to make it look like it was done quick, to give it this type of neat sketchbook aesthetic and make it look cool, just to show off, but with no real artistic function in the end. If you think about it, what's the idea behind a neatly drawn sketchbook or a painted sketchbook? Isn't it that someone will one day make research about your art, look through your stuff and find your sketchbooks and somehow publish something about them, like an art historian or something, discovering like we've discovered the sketches by Delacroix, by Degas. And yes, for art historians, it has value and it helps to see the creative process of the artist. But you are the artist, you're not the art historian here. And you have to ask yourself this: are you making art for the sake of the art, or for whoever will be interested in learning more about your process potentially in the future? Are you making sketches to make a work of art, or as a work of art in itself? And if you choose the second option, do as you want. It's your art, it's your sketchbook. A sketchbook can indeed be a piece of art in itself, I agree. And some artists actually excel at using the sketchbook just as another medium for their art, even with the idea of exhibiting the sketchbooks at some point as works on their own. Although I don't think this is for everyone, and I think that for most artists, a sketchbook should be an unexceptional thing, as forgettable as a post-it note. In fact, I consider my post-it notes just as important as my sketches because they also help me get my paintings done. Sometimes I write a note or draw a sketch to myself to remember to make some type of modification later on, like put this arm lower, change the eyebrow, more light tones in the back, whatever comes to my mind. You see that in this case, the point is to help me work on my main work. I don't think that this post-it note has any value in itself, and to me, it's the same for whatever is in my sketchbook. In my mind, it's purely functional. What matters is the actual work. What matters is what's supposed to be exhibited at some point, and I'm not planning on displaying my sketchbook at a show at any time in the future. I'd rather burn them, to be honest, than let anyone exhibit them in a show. And maybe this vision of the sketchbook, or the lack of real artistic value of the sketchbook, is due to how influenced I am by Caravaggio, an artist from which we have zero surviving prep work. We don't have a single sketch from him. Why? Maybe he has made a few sketches and studies and they disappeared, which is possible. But in this era, students and collectors always liked to keep and preserve some drawings from the masters, so it wouldn't really explain the total absence of sketches. No, in the case of Caravaggio, we have nothing. Maybe he did a few scribbles here and there, but didn't think that it was worth keeping. And regarding his painting process, most sources state that Caravaggio did not draw but painted directly in color by copying from life, which can be confirmed by the frequent pentimentos or pentimenti, I think it's how we are supposed to say, that we can see by analyzing his art. Caravaggio apparently painted directly from life by blocking in his composition with a brush and with some type of dark paint, establishing the main highlights with dashes of lead white directly on the canvas, and introducing this way the main outlines of this composition into a wet ground before applying the real colors. He didn't waste any time drawing studies and copying them and went straight for the big painting. And that's also how I like to work. I still have a sketchbook for ideas and composition, but one day I hope to become good enough to ditch it completely. For the moment, I still rely on a sketchbook for most of my compositions. And as you'll see, this is the main function of my sketchbook. I don't draw for fun. Every drawing that I make is either a memento for a future project or a plan for a composition. Now, regarding fun, obviously, for a lot of people that can be a great virtue of the sketchbook, just drawing for fun, but here again, that's another argument to not try to make your sketchbook look perfect. Sketching for fun is achieved if you have room to experiment, if you don't stress about making errors. If I really want to draw for fun, I'm going to do something different for my work. I don't draw for fun for my art, and maybe that's a problem, but if I really want to draw for fun, I'm going to do some D&D monsters, some type of weird caricature, some type of silly drawing for my kid. That's what I call drawing for fun. It's not part of my work. Sketching for fun is only achieved if you have room to experiment, if you don't stress about making errors, and if you don't take yourself too seriously. It's not what I do in my case in my sketchbook, but a sketchbook can be a great way to explore new ideas and experiment with different techniques and take risks. Just be silly, draw silly things. By embracing imperfection, you can freely explore your creativity without the pressure of creating flawless artworks. Sketchbooks are a fun tool for artistic growth. Embracing imperfection in your sketchbook will allow you to focus on the process rather than the end result. That's where the fun lies. If you worry about people noticing imperfections in your sketchbook, you're not going to have fun. A sketchbook is a private and personal space. It's supposed to allow you to freely express yourself without the fear of judgment. And that's one key idea here. Fear of judgment is unavoidable for an artist. Being judged for the art you make is a necessary side effect of the very act of creating. When you show your art, when you publish a picture online, when you have an exhibition, you're being judged, positively or negatively. That's just how it is. When people look at your art, they somehow evaluate, they judge it. and it's pretty demanding. It can crush your spirit and ruin the fun, even if you have positive feedback. Fortunately, you can get at least one private artistic space where you can draw without fear of judgment, and this is your sketchbook. Embrace imperfections. Forget about the geniuses making sketchbook masterpieces and just start with the idea that your sketchbook is supposed to suck. Your sketchbook should be a mess, not a masterpiece. As I said, the sketchbooks that I use for my work are not about fun, they are purely instrumental. I don't always have my sketchbook in my pocket. I don't draw in the train, I don't draw to pass time. Every time I pick it up, it's either because I had this quick idea in the shower and I need to remember it before it's too late, or it's because I want to start a new canvas. Almost every new page that I start is related to a canvas that I want to start painting in my studio. I either start with thumbnail trials or with random things that I envision for my future project, like a basic idea. Basically, the sketchbook for me is like a space to project my imagination before I'm ready to start on the canvas. I like to make everything proportional, so I always draw a rectangle in my sketchbook with the same proportions as my canvas. As I said, every page in my sketchbook is usually linked somehow to a canvas in my studio. I make it proportional. That's a great help for me. It's basic math, just in case if my canvas, for example, is 38 by 46 centimeters and the width of the page in my sketchbook is, let's say, 13 centimeters, I simply calculate the height through cross multiplication, so it would be 13 times 38 divided by 46, and that's how I find this, and that's very simple, basic proportion math here. Another thing that I often do in my sketchbook is establish composition lines. I always like to arrange my composition around the thirds and the median lines. It creates a dynamic picture. The rule is to try to put the main focus points around the intersections of the thirds, and it always works. Plus, it has another benefit, as it sort of works as a basic grid to transpose the sketch onto the space of the canvas. Simply draw the same grid on the canvas before you start painting, and you'll have easy anchor points to mentally go from the sketchbook to the painting without error. No matter how big the surface is, these lines help me navigate the space and draw the composition with paint where it's supposed to be, so no issue of misplacement or distortion. Working on the tiny surface of a sketchbook is very different from working on a large surface, so anything that can help me make the transition from the tiny space of the sketchbook to the big surface of the canvas is a great help. In my sketchbook, I don't really refine my drawing. I very rarely shade, and I often leave the drawings half finished. Basically, as soon as I reach enough confidence that I know that I can start painting, I don't really see the point in continuing with the sketch. That's why many of my sketches are abandoned halfway through or done on like random pieces of paper that I have around, because I don't really care about what they end up being like when they're done. Sometimes I'm reading a book, doing the dishes, and an idea comes to mind, so I just pick whatever piece of paper and pencil I can find, and I'll sketch something. And if I have the courage, I'll then transfer it into my sketchbook. Most of the time, the idea is enough, and the only thing I need is to just not forget it. I don't need to draw an intricate and polished shaded drawing to remember an idea. I just need to keep a trace of it. I used to do it, but now I don't. And most of the time, to be honest, I don't even take the time to draw what I have in mind, and I just write it down with words. I do a lot of writing. Sometimes I just find an idea to add it to the painting and just write it down. Then I simply find a model and paint directly, because just the mere evocation of the words is enough for me to visualize how I'm going to do that in the painting. So I don't need to spend and waste any time doing this painstaking work of drawing something in my sketchbook when I can do that directly on my canvas. So here it is, that's my opinion on the function of a sketchbook. That's my take at least, and as I said, you can see it more as a part of your art, if you prefer, rather than a part of your process, like me. If you consider that your sketchbook is a part of your art, then sure, forget about what I said and enjoy making it as pretty as you want. But if you're like me and you think that a sketchbook is just an instrumental part of your process, then don't feel bad if your drawings don't look good, if they feel unfinished, if they don't have this perfect aesthetic of the quick sketch. Don't try to fake it, to give this false aesthetic if it's not your thing. Be yourself. Use your sketchbook to better your art and not to be art in itself. Tell me, how is your sketchbook? How do you see the function of your sketchbook? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Joy and inspiration to you, my friends.